Chapter 70: Starbucks and Speedboats. Now, 10th of February 2010, 4th floor offices, 10:41 a.m. Gina Latimer stood at the edge of the open-plan floor, heels clicking softly as she stepped into the neglected alcove labelled pantry. It resembled something in between a junk cupboard and a half-abandoned staff kitchen. A large black percolator sat dormant on the counter, unplugged, light off, coated with a fine film of dusty apathy. The cupboard underneath it had been repurposed. Not a single coffee pod or filter bag in sight. Just broken keyboards and what appeared to be bags and bags of unopened cat litter and tins of cat food in the cupboard under the sink. She opened the fridge. A few sad lunches in Tupperware, a can of Red Bull, nothing else. She shut the door slowly. Her eyes swept the office beyond, row after row of desks, stretching in both directions around the square ring of the floor, at least 40 employees visible. If you looked at the floor from above, it was just rows, endless rows of desks like a computer farm, each bank identical. 10 monitors, 10 keyboards, 10 human-shaped silhouettes silently working, or pretending to. Gina had seen this layout in a dozen countries. The smell of recycled air, fear, and burnt coffee that no longer existed. She walked the row slowly, eyes scanning the top of every desk, and there it was, on every single desk. A Starbucks cup. Everywhere. Americanos, lattes, caramel whatever the hells. Half the office floor looked like it had been sponsored by the branch 4 floors down. Everyone froze as though locked on their monitors, not daring to make eye contact with a woman so powerful she could issue redundancies with a raised eyebrow and bankrupt careers before her coffee went cold. This was a woman whose reputation preceded her, and she was the very epitome of do not speak unless spoken to by her. Keep working, Gina said. I'm not here to get in your way. The entire floor acknowledged by carrying on exactly as they were. She stopped at one desk, a woman obviously riddled with fear, trying to keep her head down, working very hard, yet still trying to appear even busier than she already was. It was her secondary screen background that immediately caught her eye. A picture of Yvonne Atkins and Jim Fenner from Bad Girls, a show that no native Singaporean should know. Lizzie sat motionless at her chair, hands still on the keyboard. Gina read the nameplate aloud, sharp and flat. Talavera. Elspeth Talavera. The woman looked up, startled. Gina perched herself on the central divider of the desk, casual but commanding, legs crossed like she claimed a throne between the monitors. Lizzie hesitated. Am I in trouble? No, not unless you do something monumentally stupid in the next 30 seconds. Lizzie tried to smile, failed. Gina leaned slightly forward, just enough to close the height gap without softening the dynamic. Elspeth, she said, turning slightly towards her. Is that what you go by, or do you prefer something else? The woman blinked. I'm fine with Elspeth, but everyone calls me Lizzie. Right, Lizzie it is then. Gina didn't smile, but her tone lightened slightly. I just want to get the feel of this place, and before I ask you anything else, I wanted to make sure I know who I'm speaking to. Not what your badge says, but what you actually answer to. That's step one in understanding how badly this place has gone off the rails. Lizzie gave a small, nervous laugh. That's actually nice. I mean, most of us have Filipino names, but we go by whatever's easier. Lizzie's what I've always used here. Gina, sensing the tension thawing, continued. I wanted to ask a few questions to an analyst here, With so many to choose from, it was your desktop background of Yvonne Atkins that caught my eye, and I thought, who better to ask than a fellow Bad Girls fan? Gina offered, with a sense of humanity about her now. Lizzie immediately felt slightly more relaxed, sensing a connection with this all-powerful woman who was every bit as intimidating as Yvonne Atkins herself. I do have to ask, though, Gina mused with genuine curiosity, how did you ever get to know of Bad Girls? It was very much a UK-centric show that never went global, and I'm pretty sure it doesn't meet the strict censor laws to ever be able to watch or buy here in Singapore. Lizzie immediately hesitated, remembering who loaned her the DVD box set in the first place. She was smart enough not to mention his name, but offered how one of the UK managers had the DVD box set he loaned her, and she instantly became a fan of UK TV from that point on. Gina naturally picked up on the evasion around the Who, working out that Daniel Carter cast a long shadow, and mere mention of his name in the office was now taboo, no doubt thanks to Osterhagen. Gina scanned Lizzie's desk. Another Starbucks cup. So tell me something. Why the hell is everyone buying Starbucks when the office has a pantry and a budget for coffee? Lizzie glanced around and gave a half shrug. The pantry's been kind of repurposed. The machine's off. No pods, no beans, just broken IT stuff. Someone is also using it to store kitty litter. So I noticed. So the coffee budget went exactly where, as it's still being claimed, Gina asked. Lizzie looked uncomfortable. Team lead meetings. They go off-site now. Bob the director and the team managers. Lunches, drinks, no receipts. They say it saves time on expense claims. Gina tilted her head. Right, so instead of filter coffee and a bit of morale, you've got burnt milk and £6 a cup silence. She turned to face her fully. What you just told me in 30 seconds, Lizzie, is more valuable than 2 hours of meeting minutes I've just waded through. You've explained the culture, the leadership failure, and the morale deficit with a fucking latte. She looked back out at the sea of cubicles. And it all points to one person. Gina's face remained unchanged. Daniel Carter. He used to manage you and your team directly, right? Lizzie nodded, worried about the direction of the conversation. Yeah, he trained us as well. Lizzie's still nervous, not wanting to disappoint this woman, but also not wanting to besmirch Daniel's legacy as others had done. What was he like? Gina asked. Lizzie hesitated. He was different. Bit cheeky, funny, very sharp. Not always by the book, but he had our backs. It felt like someone was leading the team, not just managing it. He was not a pushover by any means, and really used to roast us when we did wrong, but he also defended all of us if anyone came at us when we were in the right. We all like working for him, and I guess you could say we do miss him and how it used to be. That's fine. I really value your opinion, Lizzie. Most of what I get is dry corporate output, reports, workflows, timelines. Very neat, very beige. She glanced around the floor. But that doesn't show me what actually goes on down here, what the people doing the work see. And from where I'm sitting, everything Bob Osterhagen touches turns to shit. He's like fecal Midas. So I need to understand what this place actually ran like when it was functional and people enjoyed coming into work. Lizzie smiled. It ran well when Daniel was here. Good, Gina said, nodding once. That tracks. Which brings me to the arsehole. She flicked her eyes in the direction of Bob's desk. Lizzie followed the glance instinctively. Bob, sitting 2 rows across, just looked up as Gina said it. She looked directly at him, meeting his gaze, unsmiling as though offended that he had the nerve to interrupt her conversation by appearing in her line of sight. A few nearby heads dropped quickly. A few others were smirking, pretending to focus. Now, don't get the wrong idea. I'm not here trying to be your mate. I'm not as painfully transparent as the clown over there doing his good cop, bad cop routine on rotation. Everything I've seen from Bob so far, and I mean everything, is a train wreck. Lizzie laughed before she could stop herself. Bob looked again, opting for a frown at Gina's lack of professionalism and locking eyes with her. Gina met his gaze and held it. She didn't blink. She didn't speak. Bob looked away first. See that? She said to Lizzie. I called him an arsehole. He heard me. I wanted him to hear me. I gave him the look. The, go on, say something look. And he put his fucking head back down like a child in detention. That is because he knows. If he tries to challenge me, I'll have his arse out of here so fast he won't have time to pack up his ego. Bob looked up again, sitting up firmly in his chair, notably defensive now. Gina turned directly towards him and broke the stalemate. Yes, Bob, we're talking about you. If you've got something to say, I recommend you think carefully. I'm having a conversation with one of your employees, which, unlike you, I'm qualified to do without creating a legal risk. The entire desk bank went still. Every head had lifted. Every pair of eyes was locked on the two of them. Someone coughed, trying not to laugh. Another smiled behind a raised mug. I'm currently having a conversation with someone who works for you about Daniel Carter. No tapping, no scrolling, just a wall of ears. That's right, Gina said, scanning the nearby faces. And look at you all. Absolutely terrified. See, Bob, that's the culture you've created. Saying Daniel's name in here is like uttering Voldemort, he who must not be named. At this point, phone calls had been placed on hold, ongoing systems had been paused, and the floor show entertainment had become the focus of over 100 people, all shifting their focus to the director of operations being publicly roasted. That tells me everything. It tells me people know things about what happened. It tells me your version isn't the only version. And it tells me your reports are, to put it mildly, a fucking disgrace. Bob finally spoke, voice tense. I think if you're going to discuss the Daniel Carter situation, we should do it privately, in an office. Gina swung off the desk and walked towards him slowly. Oh, Bob, we're finally on the same page. You see, that is always the bank's end game, to keep these things private and behind closed doors. And I am so pleased you are now actively working towards the same goals as me. Gina then did her classic 180 of turning praise into character annihilation. However, that ship has well and truly sailed, Bob, thanks to you. Daniel Carter is now at the centre of a multi-million-pound lawsuit. A lawsuit we're going to lose unless I clean up your mess. So no, we're no longer able to do this in private because of you. This entire mess will be made public, and every email, every message, every letter will be a public document that everyone will be able to read. So pretending it is not happening and trying to get your entire division to experience voluntary collective amnesia is not a viable strategy. She glanced at the wider room before turning back to Bob. Asking me to take it offline now is like closing the stable door after the horse has bolted. You're a masterclass in hindsight. The kind of guy who shows up 2 days after the flood with a mop and a business plan, doing his best impression of Bullseye with, here's what you could have won. Bob blinked. What? Bullseye? His expression one of genuine confusion. Gina smirked. You know, Bullseye, Jim Bowen, here's what you could have won. The cultural reference, totally lost on Bob's German upbringing. Bob, instantly on the back foot, knowing this woman didn't answer questions thrown at her during a rant, responded in the only way he knew how when confronted with names and details he didn't know. Bullshit. I don't think bringing up Jim Bowen and his mistakes is fair. We never worked together, and I think he had left before I even started, so conflating his actions with mine and doing it publicly is not fair. A few of the older British staff snorted behind their hands. Someone actually laughed out loud. Gina turned and pointed casually across the floor to one of the clusters of pasty white faces of British employees on the same bank of desks, who were laughing not only at Gina's joke, but at Bob digging himself a hole, trying to insinuate he had worked with the legendary game show host. Them, those guys there. She pointed over towards the cluster of Josh, Barney, and Felix, expats who all instantly got the reference. They actually know who Jim Bowen is, and because of that, they don't try and bullshit with tales of glory about someone, rather than just admit if they don't know who they are. More laughter. Bob still looked confused. See, Bob, that's a joke, a cultural reference, because he was a fucking game show host. She let that hang, then added, if he was talking about any prize you could win, he'd be describing a dole queue, adding, pretty soon, Bob Osterhagen will be in one. That broke the dam. The English staff, and even a few of the Singaporeans who just liked watching someone get eviscerated, started openly laughing. But just as Gina had berated Bob with all the grace of a chainsaw on a violin, something unexpected happened. From the centre console in the office, the main 92-inch screen that displayed team stats, live dashboards, and hourly productivity charts, came a jaunty trumpet riff, followed by a loud and unmistakable. Then the infamous line. Someone had accessed the master stats terminal, any one of around 15 managers with clearance, Bob included, and opened a new tab in Firefox. They'd typed bullseye opening credits into YouTube and hit play. The opening credits of the 1980s game show rolling across the wall-mounted monitor, complete with bouncing bulls, spinning dartboard, and the soundtrack of a VHS tape high on Red Bull and cocaine. That was it. The entire floor erupted. Laughter spilled out in waves. Even some of the managers gave up trying to stifle their howls. Bob exploded. Who's done that? That is not appropriate. Change the screen back now. Silence. Not one hand went up. Not a soul blinked. The mouse cursor disappeared like it had been vaporized, with no one rushing to carry out Bob's orders. Gina sighed through her nose, but couldn't stop the faint twitch of her lips. She glanced across the Brits on the floor. Josh tried to look neutral and failed. Lee Meadows was suddenly very busy talking into his headset as though on a call. Felix stared straight ahead like he'd been called into the headmaster's office. She had a whole lineup of suspects for who had just done this, but she couldn't prove it, nor did she want to try. As corporate vandalism went, it was inspired, and oddly fitting. She secretly commended whoever had added this soundtrack to her takedown of Bob. Well, she said, folding her arms, at least someone's paying attention. And for the record, if I did have a speedboat to give away, I know exactly who wouldn't be getting it. Bob didn't laugh along with everyone else, because Bob still didn't get any of these jokes. Didn't have a fucking clue why half the floor was now crying with laughter at his expense. But everyone else did. And more importantly, they all got the message, just like Bob.